Hey, welcome back to the Ready State. We're continuing our conversation about pelvic floor dysfunction and pelvic health. Now, one of the things that we believe in strongly is that when we're in good positions, we have better function. And of course, when we're in less effective positions, we see a lot of things become inhibited. We call this actual position inhibition or positional inhibition, which is shorthand for I'm in a weakened position, my body doesn't have access to its full function, and I can work there, but it's not optimal. And so once I've gone down the road of dysfunction, moving back towards a shape or position where the switches start to turn back on is going to ultimately be an effective solution, right? So yes, I can have my pelvic floor work just fine in this shape, but when I restore and normalize the function of the hip to the pelvis relationship, I may see improved function. And if I have low function, moving towards a shape that turns light switches back on may be a better treatment option or a better choice for function. Better choice for output, better choice for wattage. And ultimately, this ends up being a conversation about this: how do we improve functionality and output of the human being? Wattage, poundage, not peeing myself on a jump rope. So a lot of times, one of the first things we do is try to set up some basic relationships. And I'm not saying that this is the only relationship you need to be in when you're jumping or landing or running or twisting or jumping or throwing or whatever it is that you do, but understand that having a reference position where we're gonna have a lot of function is a good place to start, especially as I'm starting to untangle what looks like complex kind of psycho-biomotor problems. And pelvic floor dysfunction certainly is part of that narrative. So if I have my feet straight and I squeeze my butt, one of the things that happens is that my pelvis will come into a relationship where I have an excellent relationship between pelvis and femur. And that's one of the magics of squeezing your butt. And so if my rib cage is down and I pretend like those are two stacked cups, then I'm not tilting out. And people have been talking about your pelvic bowl is a bowl of water, don't tip any out the front, this anterior pelvic tilt or posterior pelvic tilt. And besides, before we get into the weeds, of flexion is bad and overextension is bad, notice that in this shape, as we've talked about before, I can handle large axial loads. And in this shape, and near this shape, I still have a lot of access to my physiology, which means I can generate stronger abdominal contractions, stronger pelvic floor contractions. So one of the things that we're trying to do when we stand some up after doing breathing exercises or mobilizing or improving blood flow is try to have this person have a reference position that they can come back to during the day, or gives them a shape or a feeling that they can maintain. So for example, if we're jump roping, where we see a lot of pelvic floor dysfunction, one of the things that happens is we say, hey, can you squeeze your butt when you're in the air? So as I jump there, I can squeeze my butt. And that's one of the ways I know that I'm in a decent shape. So I don't have to be able to squeeze my butt to jump rope or jump effectively, but I should be able to. So if I can't squeeze my butt, I may be in a position where my glutes don't seem to work very well. Positional inhibition. Okay, so one of the things then we can look at is as we begin to untangle this pelvic relationship dynamic is see the pelvis as a system. And so if I have a reference position and find my pubic bone and then simultaneously find my xiphoid process, we have what we've called the two-hand rule. And so if I set myself up into a good reference position, feet straight, balance between ball and foot and heel, rib cage comes down, organized, right? I've got a little notch here in my internal obliques. I squeeze my butt. This is a relative position where I'm going to get a lot of function. And what I'm trying to do is say, hey, look, my movements may take me out. I might be extending out of that position or slightly flexing in that position or rotating. But every time I come back, I'm in this reference range and position. Some people have called this neutral. We're going to call this organized. And this organized position is going to give me a lot of access to my pelvic floor. So for our athletes who are moving, one of the things we can do is take away some of the mystery. So if I'm jumping and I end up in this position, this is one of the shapes where we don't see a lot of good pelvic floor function happening. So when we start to come back to this two-hand rule, oftentimes this can be a simple reference position to be able to then recruit, turn on, or get them to turn off that really hypertonic pelvic floor or that positionally inhibited pelvic floor. So when you're jumping, one of the things that can help is reset, get into this position. Am I in this reference shape? And then can I maintain that reference shape? And if those points start to come apart, that may be one of the cues for why we're seeing those relationships diminish and loss of pelvic floor function. So a lot of times we fail to see that we may be reinforcing these positions over and over again in a lot of our movements. So one of the movements where we see this is initiating a squat. So we've been saying shut the door for a long time, reach back, get your hamstrings involved. And so a lot of people initiate the squat in this position, which works just fine. This kind of extension bias position certainly is functional and it allows me to get out of, I can begin and do a lot of work in this position. Certainly my spine needs to be able to go to this shape. But one of the things that happens is that in this shape, look what's happened. The hands have come apart and now I'm reinforcing a position that may lead or may be part of my pelvic floor dysfunction. Or more importantly, in order to get out of pelvic floor dysfunction, this may be a valuable tool. So what we say is, hey, find those two landmarks. So my feet are straight, I've got my balance, I squeeze my butt, set that position, and now I can brace against that if I need to, but maintaining that relationship through that marker, whether I'm Olympic lifting, whether I'm kettlebell swinging, whether I'm box squatting, powerlifting style, maintaining and keeping that relationship during my jump, during some movements, during strict movements, even in push-up, we start to see that we've been programming in a lot of this excessive lordosis, excessive low back motion, which starts to change the relationship between pelvis and femur. And when that relationship between pelvis and femur happens, when diaphragm starts to become inhibited, the other diaphragm is also inhibited. So we can start to see that, hey, these bony landmarks also correspond well with the three diaphragms of our mouth. Sue Falzoni talks about this a lot. I've got a diaphragm here, I've got a diaphragm here, and I've got another diaphragm here. So at the top of my intra-abdominal pressure system, being able to shrink wrap the musculature in this radial contractile field, I need to have access, and ideally these tops and bottoms of the container do their best to be in a position where I can have a better relationship between pelvis and femur and a better relationship between pelvis and lumbar. So this two-hand rule, as we untangle this, can be a useful strategy for people to understand that, hey, this may be contributing to a position that doesn't allow me to access my pelvic floor. So the first thing we say is, hey, let's get into a better shape and let's see what happens. And we've had athletes in our gym regularly who will jump, pee themselves, come back, and they're like, oh, when I was out of that position, my pelvic floor was inhibited because I've carried 3 babies and I've stretched out my abs and I have a diastasis recti, all those things. When I get into a better position where I have more aspects of the system turning on, we see decrease in the dysfunction we're trying to limit. Hopefully that helps.